Democratic members of Congress start writing the final version of the economic stimulus package. Hello, I'm Chris Castile in the Washington Bureau of the Oklahoman. I'm here with Senator Jim Inhofe and Mark Green of the Washington Bureau. Senator, thanks so much for coming in. The $900 billion, I guess $838 billion stimulus package is now, a compromised version now has to be written by the House and Senate negotiators, Democratic leaders pretty much, I guess. What are the chances that there will be something that comes out of this conference, perhaps late this week, that you could support?
Zero.
Why is that? Do you expect it just to be a combination of what's in the House and Senate?
If you look at what they're starting with, the work in progress now from both the House and the Senate, there's no way you can follow the conference rules and change it dramatically if you have so many areas in which they are in agreement with each other. Now, it might be the transportation, for example. The House had $30 billion, the Senate has $27 billion. That's something, but it's not going to dramatically change it. The whole concept of this thing is flawed. It's not a stimulus bill. I recently did an analysis of now this is the one before the compromise. The compromise did not change this. And it was, there's only about 7% of the entire amount that is used for stimulus. The rest is just spending money. And by the way, on this compromise, that is really phony, and I think you guys know that. I mean, it's not a compromise.
The compromise that came out of the Senate late last week.
Yeah, the compromise when they found 3 Republicans they could get to join with them. In anything that has only 3 Republicans out of 535 in Congress is not, number one, it's not a compromise. Number two, it's a Democrat bill. So clearly this is a Democrat bill. And with the exception of 2 very small tax provisions having to do with accelerated depreciation and with lost carrybacks from, I think, 2 to 5 years, there's nothing in there that does stimulate. We know what stimulates. We saw this with John Kennedy. He said back in the early 60s, over a period of 7 years after he cut taxes, he said the best way to raise revenue is to reduce marginal rates. He did it, and it increased the revenues by 62% in 7 years. The same thing happened when Reagan in 1980. The total amount of revenue that was that came in for marginal rates was $244 billion. In 1990, it's $466 billion. It almost doubled in the decade of the greatest tax reductions. That's not what this bill does. It does not stimulate. And the least they could have done is have a massive amount in here for shovel-ready projects. Now, this is something that really concerns me because our roads and highways and bridges in Oklahoma and throughout the country are shameful. And this was an opportunity to get some of those things going. We had things that would we had $64 billion worth of projects in America that could start in 3 days. All the environmental impact studies, all that's behind us, and it could have happened.
Now, your colleague in the Senate, Senator Coburn, was saying this morning, I heard him talking about a size package of about $440 billion, which would have been about the right. I think Senator McCain maybe proposed something along those lines. Is that more aligned with what you're talking about?
Well, yeah, McCain's amendment was a good amendment. The amendment, I don't agree with McCain all that often, but what he did, the things that have worked in the past in terms of which taxes to cut, how to do it, those were built into it. And then at one time he was talking about bringing it down to half the size. Well, that's still an awful lot of money, but if that's in there just for stimulus, something like that I could probably support. That isn't going to happen in conference.
Senator, yesterday on the floor, you said that the stimulus package, because it has almost I think 3 senators, Republican senators voted for it, no Republican House members voted for it. You said this may actually turn out to be a good thing for Republicans. Last night, the President Obama at his news conference said that he was a little reluctant to hear some of the criticism from Republicans since he inherited this problem from after 8 years of a Republican administration. What do you see as the politics of it? I mean, how would Republicans benefit from this?
Let me first of all correct the president. If you take all the 8 years of President Bush, and I was critical of President Bush on a lot of things that he did, but if you take the total deficit in 8 years and divide it by 8, it's $247 billion a year. What he's talking about is over $1 trillion in 1 year. You don't say, I inherited this, so I'm going to make it 3 times worse. It's just not realistic. The politics of this are kind of interesting because all 3 of us were around back in 1992 when President Clinton became president. The Democrats had the White House, they had the House and the Senate, and they got greedy and they started spending money. And we had Hillary health care, and all these things happened. And you saw what happened in the elections of '94. I'm not saying it's going to be that. There's going to be some of that happening, and I don't know how much, and it depends on whether or not the president moderates, and then whether or not Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid will let him moderate. So it could have a positive effect for Republicans.
But is there some fear on your side of the aisle, as the president was saying last night, that you could be seen as standing in the way of something that there's a lot of talk about the crisis and bad conditions, people losing jobs and such, that Republicans could be labeled as obstructionists over this?
Well, you know, you carry that to its logical conclusion. You'd say no matter what he does, we have to go along because if we don't agree with him lockstep, that we'll be obstructionists. Now, I just don't buy that. I think the American people are smarter than that. And I see as polling shifts, I don't know where it is. I heard a poll that contradicts what I'm about to say, but I saw one that showed 2 weeks ago that 76% of the American people wanted the stimulus bill, and it went down to 36% 2 weeks later. I've never seen a free fall like that.
Let me ask you real quick about Guantanamo Bay. You participated in a news conference today with actually some family members who have a lot invested in this, some whose relatives died in 9/11, others who died in Iraq or Afghanistan. The president's order allows for a year to try to sort through all the legal implications of closing Guantanamo. What do you think the chances are that deadline may slip, or that actually they may not even be able to do this?
Yeah, they can't do it. And I was glad that he put that. He was responding to a lot of the pressure of the left, I think, when he made that statement. But the statement he made was twofold. First of all, he said that we are going to order them to suspend any legal proceedings. That's a difficult thing to do because if you suspend it, then it could be they could end up in the federal court system. That's something you don't want. One thing I forgot to say in that news conference is that you have to have a special courtroom to try these people, even if they moved into the federal court, and they cost about $12 million to build one. It takes about a year. So that's not
the security.
Yeah, in the nature of the rules of evidence and the nature of the evidence, and so that would be a problem. I was very glad that after he said that we wanted to close it in 12 months, he qualified it by saying, you know, we have a lot of problems to address first. Well, the major problem, as I said upstairs, was we've got 245 left in Gitmo. Of those 170, their countries won't take them back. Mm-hmm. And of the 170, 110 are really bad Khalid Sheikh Mohammed type people. And so you don't want to. I mean, when they came out with the suggestion that there are 17 installations in America that could take some of these terrorists, one of those was Fort Sill in Oklahoma. And I don't want Fort Sill or any place else in the continental United States to be in a position where they are attracting terrorist activity. And I think that would happen. I wish there were more choices, but there aren't. Yeah, the only place, Guantanamo Bay has served us well since 1903. I've been there more than any other member. I know. I just was there last week. I take new members who haven't been there before, and really evaluate what they're doing. Those detainees are getting better treatment, better medical treatment, better food than they've ever had in their lives. And the methods of interrogation are all watched by various watch groups. The Red Cross goes in frequently. They give glowing reports. And so I just think it's a resource we have to have. We can't afford to close it, and I don't think it's going to get closed.
But you know, the thing that strikes me about that, though, is that President Obama, as a candidate, obviously was a favorite in Europe, and Guantanamo in Europe and other places is seen as the black mark on America, at least from people who subscribe to that view. Yeah. And so it seemed like very difficult for him not to follow through in some way to eliminate that.
Well, as I said upstairs, that question came out, and I said, you know, public opinion can change. We watch it change. It's true that right now it's a black mark, and it shouldn't be. And the best way to correct that is to encourage the media. Al Jazeera has been there. They've gone through, and they have not really had bad things to say about it since then. Most of the unfriendly media that we encourage to go down there leave with the idea that, well, they may not embrace it, but they don't talk about it anymore. So I think the truth is what we're going to try to rely on.
Senator, thanks so much for coming in. We really appreciate it. And look for more on Guantanamo Bay and the stimulus package in the Oklahoman.